All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, 6 Steps for a Successful Data Migration. My name is Oded Berman. I'm a cloud evangelist from the NetApp Cloud Innovation Center in Tel Aviv. With me here today is Ben Kasten. Hello, Ben.
Hi, Oded.
How are you?
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
What you doing here at NetApp?
Well, I'm
other than being a global expansion manager.
Global expansion manager for NetApp DataSense, which is a cool and awesome solution we're going to talk about in this webinar today.
Indeed, we are. So I'll start with a question maybe for the audience. Is there anyone here that was involved in a migration process that didn't experience any migration failure, missed the deadline maybe, overrun a budget, or ran into some issues with data after the migration was completed? Well, you know, lack of insights into your data can do that for you. So with that said, let's go over through our agenda for this webinar. So in this webinar, we'll talk about some of the challenges that you might be facing within your migration projects and what actually makes them fail when they do fail. We'll go through 6 steps that can be taken that will increase the chances of having a successful migration project. And we'll show you how, or Ben will show you how, we can assist you with your migration challenges and run through a demo. We would leave some time at the end to address your questions. The session is, of course, recorded, and it will be available on our website probably by end of day tomorrow. And as well, if you have any questions, feel free to send them over to us, and please use the question pane on the GoToWebinar control panel. So with that said, I think we can get started. So I'll go ahead and I'll start with a couple of items at the beginning of the agenda, and then I'll have it over to you, Ben. So each migration process, right, is somewhat unique, involving different kind of workloads and data sets, maybe different architectures, tools that are being used, and so on. And so are the reasons for the failures that we may encounter. However, when you trace back these what led to those failures, the number one reason that is often found as the root cause of it is lack of data insights, or lack of insights into your data. Now, getting these insights required is one of the biggest challenge for essentially every enterprise, every organization, and that goes beyond or even become especially challenging when you deal with data estates that is distributed across different data sources, different storage environments, across multiple regions, maybe multiple clouds, and so on. So not knowing where your data that needs to be migrated is located, not knowing what portion of the data can be migrated, or which business units will be affected, and so on, that could lead to uninformed decisions that may result at the end of the day in a cascading, devastating series of failures. Just aside this one. All right. So without taking stock of the data to be migrated and get full understanding of which teams or which stakeholders will be affected, our business operations may be disrupted, complying with regulations may be violated if data is moved improperly, or data that shouldn't be moved is moved, and application onboarding can slow down, leading at the end of the day, right, to misalignment with our business goals. Moving on, lack of insights, like we said, I mean, insights into the data is really the root for every migration process. It would determine whether that migration process is successful or not. So lack of insights could also lead to poor planning, which in the long run, it may lead to issues such as improper budget scoping, missing migration deadlines, and so on. I have a lot of animations here. If you don't understand what's is in your data, so you cannot prepare it properly for when time arrives to migrate it to its new location. And you may migrate irrelevant data that would extend the time of the migration, might add some additional costs to it. And in case, as we've mentioned, that data that it's not allowed to be moved due to any sort of regulations that are imposed, then fines may incur as well. Another animation. With the awareness, without any awareness of the data to be migrated, an improper migration tool or the migration methodology that would be selected would be improper, and that can lead once again to migration slowdowns. It can lead to additional costs and delays in the deadline. It can, in worst cases, it can even cause data losses, and this is something that we definitely don't want to happen. And finally, if we overlook security details in the data, we might accidentally, grant unwanted access, causing breaches, or on the other hand, revoke access, causing unwanted delays to the entire migration process overall. So, taking all of these challenges, taking all of these points where our migration process could fail, we sort of came up with a 6-step path or 6 items that you need to be concerned of, that implementing those or following those highly increases the chances of you having a successful migration project. So knowing your data would be the first and foremost, the most vital phase in your migration process. As discussed earlier, right? This is the root of your whether your migration would be successful or not, and everything that would follow at the end of the day depends on it. So what does it mean to know your data? So it means that we begin with finding where all the relevant data is stored. It's not an easy task, right, when operating at scale, where our data is scattered around in different storage systems, different databases, on premises, cloud, and so on. So this is one of the things that we want to have to begin with, is also we want to ensure that we have full visibility across the entire estate where our data resides. Once the data was located, we can then start determine what needs to be moved and what can be moved. Now, moving everything that we've discovered, right, that might be the easy path to start with, but we want to avoid all the implications that it will create, right, in the long term. So in the long term, sorry. So identifying where the mission critical data is, where the personal and sensitive information is located, or just identifying any type of data based on whatever criteria that is important to you is important. Different types of data at the end of the day, might require different treatment. They might be needed to moved to special locations. They might be necessary to stay where they are at the moment. So this is another thing that we need to pay attention to. With that information in hand, we can now start building up our migration plan or our migration timeline. So the more accurate the insight that we gather around our data, and the clearer and more readable they are, the chances of having a successful migration, of course, would be higher. Aligning your business would be the next step. So it's important that, first of all, to realize that if we were IT, right, so migrating data is not just an IT thing. We'll probably be in charge of the migration, right? But there are business reasons that led to it, as well as all sorts of restrictions. So to begin with, we want to have, of course, all the business leaders and all the relevant stakeholders. We want everybody to be involved, everybody to be onboarded with the process. With all the stakeholders onboarded, we can have these clear insights. With them onboarded and with the insights that we've gathered, we can now realize a few things. We can know or determine what would be our business goals. We can determine how the migration process might affect the business operations, and of course, who needs to be informed when changes are made. Next thing would be is to scope the shape of our project, and that means that and this is actually where most of the failures happen due to lack of knowledge on our data. So with the insights gathered and the business goals determined in the previous steps, we can now have a better estimation of time, the time it would take for the migration process to complete, the time it would take the relevant workloads to be migrated, and of course it will allow us to better plan and determine our deadlines. We should also be aware we would also be aware of the cost that the migration would incur and set up a proper budget for it. Next step to follow would be getting your data ready, or what we like also to call rinse and cleanse. It's all about essentially preparing and analyzing that data at this stage. So throughout all the phases of the migration project, as data is added or changed, we want to have automated ways in place that would constantly analyze our data and have it rinsed and cleansed. So, and of course, we want this thing, we want to be able to determine how that rinsing and cleansing is being done. So we want to have some policies around based on a wide range of criteria, maybe, that automatically scans and classifies our data, allowing us to essentially separate the data set that is intended to be migrated from the rest, and all of that, of course, without having any implications on our business. So when it's time for the data to be moved, right, so we can avoid moving sensitive data that it's not allowed. We want to be able to exclude data that isn't relevant for this project, that might slow down the transfer process and may cause issues, right, in the environments, in the target environment. And of course, one of the things that we really like to do is essentially identify all of that junk data, all of that duplicate data that we probably have in our environment, all of that data that it's inactive, hasn't been accessed for 2, 3, 4, and so on years. These are some of the things that we don't want to have within our data set. So now that our data set is ready, and Ben, of course, will show you, he will talk about DataSense and will show you how it could be done through DataSense and how it leads to a successful migration, how DataSense essentially allows you to address all of the things that we're currently discussing. So now that our data is essentially ready, it's time to move it to its new environment. And so migrating the data itself, at the end of the day, is really one of the critical and most challenging in almost any migration journey that you would take. And the success, right, of the migration is highly dependent on choosing the right migration solution or the right migration tool that would do the heavy lifting of the data for you. When migrating the data, there's a lot of associated challenges to overcome, a lot of things that we need to consider, such as, I mean, how do you make migration automated and efficient so the process won't take longer than planned, and we won't risk overrunning the budget or missing the deadline? How to avoid downtime, right, during the migration process itself, so our business operations are not affected and the business goals are met. How can you migrate from multiple data sources? We might have data scattered around NFS servers, SMB servers, some object storage, and so on. And another thing that is quite crucial as well is, how can we guarantee that permissions, ACLs, metadata, and so on would be migrated properly to the new environment. And it's important to understand that not all of the available tools today can address these concerns, and so choosing the right one is critical. Last thing I would discuss, and then I'll hand it over to Ben, is ensuring security or keeping your data protected, safely accessible, and of course under control. And we want to have that during the migration process, as well as when the data lands in its new environment. So this is also another factor that we need to take in consideration within our migration process. So data that exists in the original environment, it would have to be accessed right at the destination by probably the same applications, same users, same teams, and so on, once the migration is completed. So it's important to determine at that phase how we are going to enable that, right? By determine, whether the permissions will be migrated as well, or maybe this would be something that we will configure once the data lands on its destination. It's also important to ensure that permissions aren't accidentally granted to others. This is something that we know can happen. We heard a lot of stories around it. So breaches, can easily be a result of such tasks. So careful attention is required here. And lastly, retaining Active Directory group membership should be considered as well, authentication methods, and so on and so forth. So to sum it up, we have a lot of challenges, a lot of points during our migration process where the migration could fail to some extent. And what leads to that, in many cases, that if you go ahead and investigate this and backtrace your entire set of operations and so on. So in most cases, the failures would be due to lack of visibility into your data. So with that said, I'll hand it over to Ben, who will talk about DataSense and walk us through a demo so we can see how we can help you within your migration process.
Awesome. Thank you, Oded, for that. And indeed, our experience shows us that understanding the data is a critical point that will help, that holds back our customers from being successful with a migration project. And once they actually utilize NetApp DataSense, which is part of BlueXP, first of all, they're able to tackle many of the concerns and many of the challenges that you discussed up front. And if you actually look at the challenges that the customers have, it's a little bit like this poor fellow who's trying to organize his office with the incorrect solutions, right? So it's using a vacuum cleaner to make order here is just the wrong solution, the wrong tool, and that's what we see many of our customers failing with in this process, because they're just not utilizing the right solutions and the right processes to gain order and to gain governance around their data. So before we actually talk about specifically migrating or successfully migrating to the cloud, I just want to mention that DataSense helps our customers not only in successfully migrating data to the cloud, but also the storage optimization on the ongoing basis. Like you said, rinse and clean, right? It's rinse, clean, repeat. It's a repetitive action of keeping and sanitizing the data before a migration, during a migration, and post-migration to make sure that our data is sanitized properly. But not only that, the security is also a key factor, right? Because even if we manage to migrate everything properly, and Oded, today you're in one division of the company, for example, you're in HR today, and you move to finance. But when you moved, your permissions still remained open to the HR, and suddenly you moved and you have permissions to files that you do not need to have. So that understanding of permissions and always keeping the minimum required permissions is a key environment in actually keeping the storage optimized. And another key aspect of that in migration and ongoing is compliance. Imagine a customer who is an EU-based company that stores data with regarding to his customers from the EU, when moving to the cloud, regulation dictates that information about the customers will remain within a European region. Well, while migrating data, first of all, how do you know to locate files that contain personal information about an individual who resides in the EU? And how do you know where you actually place that file when it's migrated to the cloud and that it remains within a region in the EU? All of that are challenges that our customers are faced with and what DataSense could help. Okay, so NetApp DataSense, the star of the evening or the star of the day, it depends on what part of the world you are, is a solution which automatically maps, classifies, and categorizes data across any data source. So as long as you have file shares are connected to SMB NFS, you're good to go. You could use DataSense. You could have any storage vendor out there with your data. We actually could scan OneDrive, Google Drive, SharePoint, any of those applications to make sure, because literally those are also storage repositories today, database servers, so cloud storage. So imagine all of your data plane that stretches from file shares to OneDrive, for example, to Google Drive, to wherever, to cloud storage. We scan everything and look at it at a holistic view. What data do you manage? And we're able to easily classify, categorize that data so you could actually take actions in a very short time. So just to talk about our support matrix and what we actually could scan. So any file storage, object storage, databases you could see on the screen here, really there's no limit to what you could scan, whether it's SQL or NoSQL databases, and really any file repository out there is scannable by DataSense. So let's touch on just one moment, how does it actually work and why is DataSense so unique in this area? So first of all, let's talk about the deployment. Deploying DataSense is super easy and super simple. It could take anywhere from half an hour to maybe an hour or two, really, really quick. It's agentless. So in order to access the data, you do not have to actually add any agents. You add just a standard user to the file share and grant access, and you could scan the data. And we automatically upgrade and update. So really the maintenance is super low because once it's connected, we push the updates, we update frequently, you get the updates pushed. Now, I just want to say that we have a few flavors of deployment. You could deploy this in the cloud, which is your own VPC, right? So your VPC is under your control. So even if it's deployed in the cloud, no data or none of your data is actually sent out to NetApp or any other party for analysis. Everything remains within your environment. We have an installation flavor, which is an on-prem installation, which requires 2 VMs at a minimum. Or we have a dark site. If you're a security company or a government agency or whatever that just doesn't want internet connectivity to your systems, we also have a flavor to do that. So we really have all of those flavors to accommodate any of your needs. As we mentioned, in order to scan, you just need to grant access to the file shares, and DataSense will automatically start scanning your data. The scanning is always on an incremental firm. What means is the initial scan will take some time, right? Because we have to crack open the files, analyze them, and close them. But once that's done, the scan is incremental. That means that if a file in a specific share has been modified or opened and modified, we will rescan it and make sure that nothing has changed, and then and so on and so forth. So that way, we're very, very accurate. We're very nearly real time, and very low load on your environment. Let's look at the insights. The insights that we provide are out of the box. You do not have to ask DataSense to do anything. Once you scan, you'll start seeing results out of the box almost immediately. You do not have to teach DataSense anything. You do not have to configure anything. Everything will be out of the box. However, we do offer the opportunity to actually customize DataSense. You could customize the categories, you could customize what you're searching for, you could add your custom regex if you would like. So we have the out-of-the-box layer, and then the additional layer you could provide on top of that, which provides you additional depth. And to close the loop, I also allow you to take action from within data sets. So for example, you find files that are stale that you want to delete, do that through data sets. You find files that you would like to move to a different storage repository, that's also fine, do it through data sets. You do not have to leave the Cloud XP dashboard and the Cloud XP experience in order to do so. Everything is within data sets.
Let's talk about some of the use cases.
Okay.
That
yeah, that's a cool.
We could do through DataSense, giving all of its capabilities that it provides.
Okay, so we talked about helping customers migrate to the cloud, right? That's the essence of our webinar today. And let's look at the left-hand side. We have the IT enterprise, which is on-prem. You have files on NFS, you have SMB, you have some SharePoint, OneDrive. That's where your data resides right now. These are the steps that will take you to the cloud. So first of all, first and foremost, you would scan your data to understand what your data estate looks like. And like you mentioned, Oded, planning is the baseline to everything, getting the baseline of what you have. So imagine that you have a migration project coming up. Wouldn't it be great that you would know in advance what data you have, what files you have, what is stale, what is non-business related data? You would know that upfront. You would be able to plan accordingly, create a budget, also know your landing zone, how much data you need, how long it will take. Everything will be suddenly clear because you have all of that at the tip of your fingertips with DataSense so easily and really in a very short time. Now, let's talk about when we migrate the data, what typically do we see in the investigation tab? When we look at the investigation process, first of all, I would advise to take it step by step. First of all, let's get rid of all of the stale data, right? And stale data means different things for different customers, and DataSense will allow you to search stale data according to your own classification. It could be for one customer, files that are haven't been modified or accessed for 7 years, some are 5, some are 3. It really doesn't matter because DataSense has that flexibility. But in most cases, we see that stale data is up to 50% of the data that customers actually store is stale, and they do not even need to store it, or worst case, maybe archive it, right? But 50% is stale data. Another 20% are duplicate files. Well, you all know how we actually receive an email with an attachment. We just download it to our OneDrive share, and it just sits there. So a lot of data, it's just duplicate data. You may want to save one copy because it is important to have it, but still, the fact is you don't need all those duplicates. And non-business related data. People just download personal stuff, and that's another 10%. So what we find is that nearly 80% of the data that today resides on the enterprise IT file shares are not even relevant for a migration project. Now, how awesome would it be to dismiss 80% of the data upfront and easily and just deal with the 20% that you have to move? You could do that easily within minutes with DataSense. Now, after you realized and found that 20% of data that you really want to move, then you could start digging deeper into that data and automatically finding PIIs, finding sensitive data in those files, classifying those files according, let's say, for categories. Where do these files actually have to live? If these are finance-related files, they all need to move to the new home for the finance file shares, right, on the cloud. That really allows you to put your emphasis on the 20% that you really need to care about. And you could do that easily with DataSense. And taking action is the next phase where you could, first of all, either delete or move, let's say, to a bucket, all of your stale data, delete all the non-business related data, delete all the duplicates, right? You could take those actions. Or you could create policies, because a migration project isn't just a flip of a switch. It takes some time. So you create a policy through DataSense saying, hey, please identify non-business related files, or please identify duplicates. And you could then, throughout the process, just make sure that you're really keeping on top of your game in the data movement. Then you would create a clean copy to move your data. That means, okay, after you archived everything, moved everything, and created all of your clean data that you want to move to the cloud, you create a clean copy that then would be migrated easily to the cloud using the native Cloud Sync solution from BlueXP that could actually move your data from, and Cloud Sync is a cool solution that could actually migrate data from any data source and place it on any source. So imagine you have files, you search with data sets, say, hey, I found these 10 files, for example, or 10,000 files on this specific SMB share. I want to move them to a S3 bucket. Just use Cloud Sync and it will do it quickly and efficiently. It won't take that long. How Cloud Sync works, it will, within a very short time, just migrate easily those files and put them in their new home, for example, on Azure. So that is really, in essence, how we see the migration process and how that looks. So in a nutshell, migration project becomes really easy and effortless with data sets.
Okay, want to jump into the demo?
Well, yeah, let's do it. Okay.
All right, so let me hand it over. Change the presenter. All right, we're good to go.
Okay. So hopefully,
yeah,
everyone could see my screen.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, I see my screen. Awesome. So this is the NetApp BlueXP dashboard where DataSense is one of the services within BlueXP. And we have a couple of dashboards here, a couple of tabs within DataSense. The governance and the compliance tab are the dashboards where you have the high-level overview of the data. The configuration tab is where you actually add the different data sources. For example, if you want to add file shares, OneDrive, S3 buckets, you could actually do it through here. It's super easy. We integrate with AAP for labeling. We connect Active Directory, and this is where you would actually ask DataSense what to scan, because you connect the data source with the user, but it doesn't automatically start scanning. What it does is it connects all your volumes, and through the configuration tab allows you to say, okay, I want to please just map this specific volume. When we say map, what that we're looking for the metadata of these files. When we say map and classify, that's when we crack open the file to the cache of DataSense, look for all the sensitive information, all the data, the information that contains within the file, and that's what we do. Again, I want to reiterate for those who maybe joined late or missed that, when we scan the data, we do not send it anywhere outside of your environment. So it's on your VPC. The data doesn't get shipped out anywhere. Nobody sees it. It's under your full control. Okay, being said that, let's look at the dashboards of governance and compliance. And after that, we'll take a little look at the investigation tab, where we'll show you how easy it is to slice and dice the data. You don't need to be a data analyst or anything of that sort. Really simple. You could do it at your leisure and see how cool DataSense is. So in this demo environment, we have about 500 gigabytes of data. And in this case, we found 102 gigabytes of stale data. In this case, we configured it to last modified 3 years or over, but as you will see in a moment, we could change that very easily. Non-business related data, 17 gigabytes, and 92 gigabytes of duplicate files. This is quite a lot, right? So imagine you going into a migration project, and right away, you have here nearly 50% of your data, which you do not even need to deal with. How awesome would that be? Now, moving forward, we look at the different data repositories that we have and the sensitivity level. For example, we have here 140,000 items with personal identifiers, and here there are sensitive personal files that are here. But look at the file shares. Look how many files in the file shares contain sensitive personal data. You need to know about this when you're going into a migration project, because this could be really problematic. Moving on to the, I would call this sensitivity heat map. So we have the number of files down here, and we see restrictive versus permissive access. And over here, we see the sensitivity level of the files. So obviously, if we have files up here that are permissive and contain sensitive information, that's where I would put my emphasis on when we're talking about privacy. But not only that, but then you could see right here that 77% of the files in the organization are open to the organization. And that begs the question, why? Is this really necessary? Maybe we could restrict that a little bit. Okay, moving on to age of data, right? We talked about age of data. So we have the modified access created and last accessed. So what we see here is the timeline and the number of files in each timeline. So we see, for example, that we have quite a few files that have not been modified in 3 years or more. Maybe we don't even need to migrate them. Maybe we could just move them to an archive. How cool will that be if we could just dismiss all these files in advance? And obviously, another slice and dice by size. Now let's talk about file classification, because this is where actually the brains of DataSense comes in. And this is, again, done automatically out of the box. You just need to connect your data sources, and this will be done for you automatically. So remember, we will scan all of your data sources, and we will automatically create, I call them virtual buckets, according to the topic of the file. So we will scan all of your files and place all of your files into these virtual buckets. For example, a virtual bucket that contains all of the files that are related to HR health, or all of the legal NDAs, right? We will actually put them in different buckets, no matter where they are. So that is quite useful for our customers, because that already allows you to start making some order, creating some order in your environment. But we also look at the personal files or personal identifiers and sensitive personal identifiers. So personal identifiers could be anything from credit card numbers, password numbers, driver's license, national IDs. All of these are, again, created out of the box. These are all identified out of the box, but we also allow you to find and create what we call data fusion identifiers. Data fusion identifiers are identifiers which are unique to your organization. You could also do that as well. You could also create custom regex search, and you could also create custom categories for the file. So we provide you the first layer of capabilities that are out of the box. And for the next layer, you're actually able to easily, through the classification setting tab right here, actually create your own custom searches through regex or what may be, in order to create the next layer of data search. So those were dashboards, and that just gives us a high-level view of what we have. But let's look at the investigation tab, and this is where really DataSense shines, because up until now, customers that really wanted to do this across the plane were just either had no idea or no way to do it, or used tools that were very limited, tools that maybe only looked on file shares, separate tools that looked at cloud storage. Another tool looked at databases, and none of them looked at PIIs and metadata together, right? So up until today, there was not an opportunity to look and investigate your data at the holistic view. So let's take a few examples through the investigation tab and really try to understand how you could do this. So we use this very simple but very powerful filtering capability that allows us to investigate the data. Oded, just let's make this interactive.
All right.
What do customers usually look for first when they want to migrate data? What would be the parameters that you would want to look for in the beginning?
Let's maybe start with sensitivity, personal data, sensitive information.
Sure. So what we could do right now is let's look at, you see we have the different filters, and we could look at files with different sensitivity level, personal, non-sensitive, or sensitive personal, but we could go even deeper. This is what I'm going to do. Let's look at personal data. And let's look at files, for example, that contain credit card numbers. So we want to, first of all, find all of those files that contain credit card numbers. So we had nearly 500,000 files in this demo environment. And when you just click this credit card, immediately we're down to 449 files that contain credit card numbers. Now, first of all, you may want to delete these or take a look, but right away it reduces the risk of finding or migrating files with personal data in them. And you could see here that all of these are on S3, that's fine. You could also actually filter by, for example, storage repository. So you say, okay, I don't want to look on S3, I want to look on a specific
SMB server.
Okay, yeah, okay.
File share.
File share. Okay, let's see if there's a SMB server. Yeah, exactly. So you could look at working environment, or you could really look at it at different ways to slice and dice it, either on repositories, working environments, or so on and so forth. So here on this demo environment, let's look at SharePoint, for example. One item on this SharePoint. Now, we went from 500,000 files down to one single file on the file share that contains a credit card number. Now, finding one file is like finding a needle in the haystack, literally. Okay, so we found this one file, this needle in the haystack. Let's have a look and see what we found. So this is a doc file, docx file. We see all of the metadata about this file, right? And we see when it was modified, when it was accessed, all of that. We also see that there are no open permissions, so at least that is okay because we're not sharing this. There are no duplicates, which is also a good sign. But we see that there are some personal data in here, and obviously we were looking for that credit card. But we also found that there are email addresses here, right? So not only credit card numbers, but email addresses. Now, I would like to show you that we actually anonymize the data that we show in the DataSense search engine. So credit card numbers or email addresses are actually anonymized. So that's another layer of security that we provide when you use DataSense. So not only does the data not leave your premise, your environment, and your control, but any personal data that we do find is anonymized. But Oded, wait a second. This file contains more information. It contains sensitive personal information, not only credit cards. You found a good one. We found medical codes in this file. Have a look. Now, I'm guessing that this file is not a good idea to move somewhere not secure. Maybe we should leave it on-prem. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you're right.
Okay, so let's leave this file on-prem. It contains too much information to move to the cloud. Now, Oded, without a solution like DataSense, how long would it take you, if at all, you would be able to find this data? And that's a question to you, our audience, and our viewers. This is the power of DataSense. How easy it is to find this needle in the haystack with DataSense, super easy, super simple. But let's look at another solution or another filter that we have through this very simple filtration process. For example, let's look at files that have not been accessed for over 3 years, for example. We're down to 497 files. So again, for example, if my organization doesn't care about saving or retaining files that have not been accessed for over 3 years, we would just discard these files right away. Right? And we also give you the opportunity to create a custom search. So let's say last access, you could do older than or have not been accessed in the last. So let's say 2 years. Okay, we will submit. So here are the files that are older than 2 years right away. But let's add another filter here, Oded, and let's look at all of the duplicate files that have not been accessed in the last 2 years. We could just check has duplicates. 54,000 files have duplicates and have not been accessed in the last 2 years. This is 10% of our data. Remember, this demo environment had nearly half a million files, 50,000. I mean, why? Why keep this? Also, they have not been accessed. They're duplicate files, just delete them. And that takes me to the next capability of DataSense. Let's select all of these 54,000 files, right? We just select all of these. And this, it's grayed out here because I don't want me to actually delete the files from the demo environment. That would, but you could easily just click the delete button and they're gone, right? So this is really something easy because you could delete these files and just remove these files. But maybe you don't want to delete them right away. A best practice wouldn't really be to delete them right away. Maybe let's move them to a quarantine share just before we want to delete it. You could actually move these files or copy these files easily through the NetApp native solutions within BlueXP and just move these files elsewhere and get rid of them for the migration project and look at them at a later time just to make sure that these could actually later on be deleted. So you could use CloudSync, move these files to a different location, take care of them after, but you don't have to worry about them during your migration process. And it's one less thing to worry about.
And you could use the same tools to perform the migration itself, right?
Exactly. So you could use the same tools to clean up your environment. And once the environment is clean, later on, do the migration as well through these solutions. But this is the power of DataSense, the easy way how to research your data, but later on actually take action with it. So we really have the full scope and the full breadth of technologies. You don't have to exit DataSense or BlueXP at all. You can really create all of these workflows through DataSense itself. So we give you the power to actually complete the migration upfront. So that was just a short presentation of the power of DataSense. I hope it was useful. Any questions from the crowd out there?
Yeah, there's tons of it. So
okay.
I suggest that let me do this. Let me grab back the screen.
Mm-hmm.
All right, the deck, I saw some questions regarding the deck. So yeah, we would share the deck in a PDF format. It would be part of the, it would be in the website tomorrow along with the recording. One of the things just to note within that deck, you would have a few resources that might come handy if you want to get some further information on DataSense. So there's a link for the DataSense or BlueXP classification webpage. We've attached also a link to a new ebook that was just released covering all of these angles that we've discussed called Why Data Migration Projects Fail, and a link to the technical documentation for anyone who wants to get started and learn how to, let's say, deploy DataSense, use the investigation tab, configure some customized PIIs, and so on. So let's do that. Ben, if you could open your control panel, there's a section there called questions. So if you could just click there on the arrow, it would pop the screen out and you could expand it.
Questions. Okay.
You know what? Let's
take a look.
Yeah, let's take a look. Okay, so first of all, thank you everybody for sending those questions.
Wow,
yeah, let me just delete these ones. All right. So, all right. So let's look at that question here. So, how does DataSense know that data is sensitive? What parameters it is checking to flag as sensitive data?
Cool. So first of all, how it works is really our NLP technologies that scan the documents and know that it's a sensitive data. Sensitive data is created by regulators, right? Sensitive data is by GDPR and other regulations is deemed sensitive according to the regulator. So that's how we deem if it's sensitive. And the way it works is that's our technology that knows how to quickly scan the data and actually deem it as sensitive data, personal data that could be driver's license or IP addresses or email addresses. But personal sensitive data, that is again data that is by the regulator. And by the way, if some data is sensitive to the a specific organization, you could actually create your own custom searches to find that sensitive data as well.
Yeah, I see that a couple of people asked the same question here. All right, so just remove that one. Let's move on to the next question. Will the search include special characters like I don't know how to call that special character, but does it count for special characters and accents?
Exactly, yes. Yeah. So for instance, Russian or Japanese or Chinese languages, right. Yes, it does.
Are there any
there are exceptions. There are, but we could refer to our documentation. There are particular parameters. That's
correct. Okay. When you see duplicates, if they are located in different locations or sources, can you choose which duplicate to move off?
Yes, you could. That's a great question. We will actually show all of the duplicates, and you could see the source, and you could decide which duplicate you want to save and which duplicate you would like to delete. Great question. And by the way, that is really the power of DataSense, because we do find duplicates across multiple environments.
Across the entire estate.
Exactly.
Another question, I think you've touched that on one of the slides. How DataSense will help to migrate other OEM data like HP, 3PAR to NetApp on premises?
Okay, that's actually a great question, because no matter what or who the vendor is, it could be HP or others. Once you're connected through SMB and NFS, DataSense could actually, first of all, scan, map, and analyze that data, but also migrate Cloud Sync from those data sources to the new location.
What if your source and destinations are NetApp systems or ONTAP-based systems?
So that
could you leverage SnapMirror?
Yes, exactly. So if they're NetApp to NetApp, you could leverage SnapMirror. You could also leverage just NFS to NFS, right? But Cloud Sync would be more efficient. But if it's NetApp to NetApp, you could do.
Okay, let's look at this one. Not sure that I see all the question. Okay. Part of on-prem cloud migration process, does DataSense give you some kind of guidance where to move the data, where to move the data during the migration process, like move a data set to CVO or move a certain data set to ANF or S3 and so on?
Okay, so that really is up to you as a customer to decide. Files that are classified by DataSense, right? You could say, well, I'm a finance company and I need all my Excel sheets that I work on a daily basis to be on ANF, but maybe the HR documents, my employee contracts that I just need to keep on file, but not access them every day, those I could move to S3, for example. So it really depends on what your organization is, what you need, and where you need them to be. But the classification helps you make those decisions.
All right. Another question here is, what is the input for DataSense? Do we point DataSense to our on-premises NetApp, or in that case, any other storage repository, and let it scan, or do we need to perform data collection before we ingest the data into DataSense?
You do not need to do that. You do not need to ingest any data. The only thing that you need to do, and I showed that in the beginning, is create a user on your system and let DataSense with that user access your data. Basically, entering your credentials of that user to DataSense, and that's it.
All right. How long it takes to implement DataSense on an on-premises environment without internet access?
It's pretty quick. The challenge that for environments without internet access is if you need support, we can access and look at it live. But that's really the only drawback. It's really quick. Literally, you need 2 virtual machines, one virtual machine for BlueXP, the second virtual machine for DataSense. Once those virtual machines are there, we'll send you the link for and you can download the package, deploy it, and that's it.
Do you need to have admin credentials?
No.
No. Simple as that. No.
Okay,
I see that there are some questions here, a few questions around pricing. How DataSense is purchased, subscription, is it priced based on capacity, and how DataSense is priced?
Okay, let me take all the pricing questions and answer them. So DataSense is priced by scanned capacity, right? So the amount of data that you would like to scan with DataSense is the capacity to purchase. And there are a few options to actually purchase DataSense. The easiest option is to buy it through your preferred hyperscaler, right? You could go into the Azure Marketplace, AWS, Google Marketplace, and actually procure DataSense through the hyperscalers marketplace, and you can actually activate it through there. Super easy, and you could, and it's charged. That's a beauty. It's charged per capacity, and the price is $50 per terabyte per month. So when you subscribe through Marketplace, you use DataSense for your product, for the duration that you require it. If you don't need it, just switch it off, and that's it, like any other solutions out there. Another option is if you would like, you could buy it through your NetApp rep through license mechanism, and that's another option as well. So really, all of the types of flavors are out there, but the pricing is $50 per scanned terabyte per month. That's basically it. Straightforward.
I see that more questions are flowing in.
Okay.
Do you have more time or?
Well, yeah, for our customers always.
Okay, so first of all, I mean, yeah, we kind of scheduled that event for an hour. So first of all, to anyone who's still here, thank you for joining. We'll stay. Right. We'll stay and try to address the questions that are being popped. Is there any free trial for DataSense?
Yes. So
how does that work?
Super simple. Just search in your favorite search engine, NetApp DataSense. It will take you to the DataSense webpage. Through the DataSense webpage, you have 1 terabyte free of charge to try out DataSense. That will take you to the page where you could register through your hyperscaler and try it out. It's free.
All right. Yeah. That's good to know. Due to confidentiality, there are certain files and folders that administrator and/or domain admins are not permitted to access. Will these bypass that?
No, it wouldn't if the user doesn't have access. obviously wouldn't bypass. Also, by the way, this question may come up is encrypted files. What do we do with encrypted files, right? That's another side of that question. Obviously, we can't enter and we can't read them, but we will categorize them as encrypted.
Yeah, there's actually a question here, does DataSense unencrypt
No, exactly.
data?
So I knew that question was coming up, so I answered it right away. And no, we don't. But you'll know at least. Remember, we're talking about migrations, and even if we can't read it, still you know, hey, this is your bunch of files that are encrypted and were not scanned and analyzed by DataSense. Maybe move them to a separate location so you could investigate them further, right? By the way, this is a sneak peek to a ransomware solution. What happens if in a certain file share, encryption rate suddenly goes up?
It's a great indication for having a ransomware attack.
Yep. Yeah, but that's in our next episode.
Can DataSense be purchased as a data classification tool that partners can take to clients and analyze data?
Absolutely, yes. We work with many partners out there, and those partners actually use DataSense to benefit their customers. And absolutely, talk to us and we will help you set that up and use DataSense for your partners. Absolutely, yes.
There's a great question here by VB Abraham. He says, we are a service provider. How DataSense can be offered to our end customers?
So it really depends on the mechanism of how you would like to sell it. You could buy DataSense as a partner and resell it to your customers with added value services, right? Your consulting services or your services of data migration. Or your customer could actually be the owner of DataSense, but you could actually assist them in the process of migration. So many flavors are out there, and it's all about helping our customers, right? Because we see here at NetApp how our customers are really struggling to hit their goals on migration, and any way that we could help is important to us. So just talk to us and we'll help your customers achieve their goals.
Okay, let me see. All right, there's a question here. I think you addressed this already, but it's good that we repeat that.
Okay.
Can you define patterns or regex to match? We have sensitive data to migrate to Azure storage from on-premises NetApp, like citizens ID, account numbers, driver licensing number, in a specific format in different countries.
Yes, the answer is yes. So first of all, driver's license and IDs from a majority of the countries is already out of the box in DataSense. You don't have to configure it. In the event you need to configure that, it's totally possible through the classification setting tab in DataSense. Yes, it's there. We'll help you to do it, and it's super easy to do and super helpful and very powerful.
All right, let's see. Okay, there are due to users being able to create subfolders and save files in very long file names, over 256 characters, will this still be moved?
I'm not sure about the move, right?
If we're moving files with, if I understood the questions correctly, are we able to move when we move files that have more than 256 characters? Does do the file name persist with whatever amount of characters it had on the destination?
I've never encountered that question. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm familiar with a lot of issues with that back in the days, but yeah.
But remember, the key aspect here is finding those files with the problems.
Exactly. Another question here: when these moves schedule executes and experienced some failure, will these stop or still continue to the next file?
We'll continue. Just skip it and report back, hey, this failed, and
right.
List keeps on growing with the questions.
Yeah. Let me just clear those that we've answered. If we missed anything, then we'll get back to you
Sure.
in the next few days. I don't know, something's not working on this. I'm not able to delete these questions. Okay, I see a few questions that around the recording, and so yes, I mean the recording will be shared. It should be receiving, I guess, by tomorrow, an email with a direct link to it. Anyways, it's going to be available on the website on bluexp.netapp.com /events, and it would include a link the slide deck that we've used.
Yeah, there's a question about how long does it take, right? There's a question about how long will it take to search 100 terabytes of data.
Mm-hmm.
So the question of how long is connected to what you want to do, right? And what your data consists of. Scanning 100 terabytes of MP3 files will take much less than 100 terabytes of text files, right? So first of all, it really depends what the files consist of. But let's say it's 100 terabytes of text. So we talk about map and classify. Mapping the data will take a matter of a few hours. But if you want to map and classify, our rule of thumb is between 15 to 30 terabytes a day to map and classify per collector, right? So if you remember, we mentioned that you could have several collectors. So for example, if you want to scan 100 terabytes in one day, I would advise to have 3 or 4 collectors, 3 or 4 VMs or machines in the cloud, right? And then it will take you a day to scan 100 terabytes. It really depends on the type of data that we're scanning and how many collectors. So there's variables out there that you could actually control and know how quick or how slow you want to scan.
Okay, on my panel, at least it's the last question.
Okay.
NetApp clusters, ONTAP clusters, already provides cold data reports. The inactive data reporting, it's called. What's the difference of DataSense providing cold data information that I think you showed us on the governance tab?
So cold data is only one aspect of what DataSense could do, right? Because cold data on NetApp is one thing, but cold data across your environment, which could be NetApp, non-NetApp storage, OneDrive, Google Drive, SharePoint, that and cloud, for instance, S3 buckets is something that ONTAP can't do. So our power is vendor agnostic, cross-platform, and multiple parameters to scan not only cold data, but for example, cold data that contains personal information. That's where we're actually
going. Cool. While you were talking, another question came in.
All right.
So let's take that last one. The LAD will be distributed automatically between collectors deployed in the same working environment.
The load.
The load, sorry.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly.
So it offers a scale out.
Exactly. The scale out architecture where you would actually deploy as many collectors as you wish. The load would be distributed accordingly and shorten the scan time.
All right. My board is empty.
All clear. Okay.
All right. So thank you very much. Thanks, Ben, for being here and addressing everybody's questions.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a lot of fun. And we invite our customers to try out DataSense. It was a question about a trial, and it's free. So why not?
Yeah, and feel free to reach us. I don't think we've left our emails. Let me put it in the chat. So what's your
it's ben.kesten at
ben.com with Kesten within
Kesten.
All right. Yep. I got that right. So I've put the email addresses in the chat. feel free to send us an email. And we'll go through once again tomorrow through the questions, and in case we missed anything, so we get back to you.
Yeah, and feel free to reach out if we missed something or you have follow-up questions. We'd be glad to continue the conversation offline.
All right, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a great day, and see you in our next webinar.
Joe?
So.